And then the next item, I know this one has been tabled the last 2 meetings, and I guess we're gonna make it a trifecta. We're gonna table this, I'll make a motion to table it, but I wanna say that I feel as though this past week we made some movement on being able to actually take the title of 600 Ridge Road. Not to sound like a broken record from the last couple of board meetings, but the county legislature on November 14th, they did the final approval to sell the property from the county of Monroe after they had taken it as a referee's deed in a real estate tax foreclosure. And the county legislator approved the sale of 600 Ridge to the town of Webster for $1. Now, sounds great, right? We wanted to make sure 3 things. One, there's a DEC agreement that the attorneys that we have hired to help the town, Knopf Shaw, is working out. I think there's 8 different parties that have to sign that agreement. In layman terms, it really protects the town against future lawsuits and the DEC coming and putting in a cleanup of whatever is on that site on the town. There's one agency that has not signed that agreement yet, the Oil Spill Fund of, I guess, New York State. From what we've heard, it's not that they have a problem with the agreement, it's a bureaucratic thing we're chasing around the gal or the guy who would sign it, so they have said they will sign it. The second issue that we've had is that the title company that we're working with to get an owner's insurance policy on it is the same one we worked with when we bought 8 acres at the highway facility a couple years ago. We bought that 8 acres off the county after their tax foreclosure auction. And we just wanted to make sure we had a title insurance policy so that we didn't have to worry in a year or 2 that somebody would come out of the woodwork with a priority claim of $1 million, and now the town had to pay that $1 million. Best way I can put it. Frontier Abstract, the title company, needed to make sure that they got the deeds from the county, the referee's deeds, and how they were going to then deed it to us, because believe it or not, the devil's in the details on that, and we were having some problems getting the exact structure of it. I think we have it now. I think that will give Frontier Abstract the ability to now give us a quote on what it's going to cost for the title work and the title insurance policy, and hopefully by the next meeting we'll know if it's $1,000 or $1,500 or $2,000. And if everything goes well, and Josh, I know you and Matt and everybody, this is almost a good segue into your presentation. I'd like to think that the town will have the title to that property by mid-January. And once we have title to that property, we will start to do some things with 600 Ridge Road. So, sorry if that's TMI, but I'd rather over-explain that than under-explain it, since 600 Ridge, the old furniture strippers, is a pretty linchpin issue in the town of Webster and has been for 20 years. So, any questions before I make a motion to table this? Well, I make a motion to table a resolution on the title work and abstract work with Frontier Abstract on 600 Ridge Road.
Second.
Supervisor Flaherty?
Aye.
Councilwoman Wynn?
Aye.
Councilman Cato?
Aye.
Councilwoman Kelly?
Aye.
So I guess that's my segue, or handing the baton off to kind of a, since we're not going to have a workshop the 28th next week, we kind of are going to put a little workshop in tonight, and so I'll hand it over to Josh and Matt Jack for a little presentation.
Thank you, Supervisor. So the topic of tonight's presentation is the 2024 Transportation Alternatives Program, also commonly known as the TAP grant. So we're going to just be presenting an opportunity that would help further our vision for this part of our town. So we're going to be covering a few things in the presentation. We're going to go over a review of the recent revitalization efforts to date and refresh your memories on some of the priority plan recommendations presentations. Matt Chatfield from the Webster Economic Development Alliance is going to speak a little bit about the TAP grant program, the intent and eligibility. Then we're going to take a look at our proposed streetscape improvement scope of work and some preliminary cost estimates. We'll talk about some next steps, and then we'll open it up for question and answer and discussion with the board. But just to refresh everyone's memory, the map on the screen is illustrating the limits of the study area. It included Empire Boulevard from the Webster-Penfield line all the way to Hatch Road. And it also included gravel from Empire to Old Ridge, and then Old Ridge from Empire west to Bay Road. So I'm briefly going to go through this timeline of some milestone events just to refresh everyone's memory. This effort really did get its start back in June of 2021 when Matt was successfully able to secure a grant, a $90,000 grant to create a revitalization plan for this area. So then the town then spent 4 to 6 months developing the scope of work, developing a request for proposals for consultants, and by January of 22, we did select Ingalls Planning and Design to help us conduct the study. So we then went and formed some technical committees. We also formed a citizen action committee that was comprised of residents, business owners, and other interested parties. So we officially kicked off the project in March of 2022. Within the first 4 months, we went live with a online, what's called a social pinpoint, online public participation website. We had over 800 unique participants. They were able to submit comments, ideas. There was a physical map of the study area, and they were able to place different symbols on different areas and come up with suggestions for needed improvements from their perspective. We then followed up with an open house, a public open house back in October of 22. We had over 70 attendees, which was pretty impressive. The following month in November, we engaged with the county's engineering firm, Day Engineering, and they began phase 2 environmental testing at 600 Ridge Road. We also had a structural assessment of that building performed in November, followed by an income survey of the area, the results of which indicated that this area does meet the threshold for low to moderate income, which opens up potential additional CBDG funding grant sources. So in January of 23, we received the 400-page report of the environmental site assessment from phase 2. Town staff and others spent the next few months trying to digest the contents of that report, which culminated in a public presentation in April of this year to this board at the Spry Cafetorium. By June of this year, we were able to wrap up and finalize the revitalization plan. And in September, 600 Ridge Road was once again on the foreclosure auction list. There were no bidders, as we've experienced each time it's gone up for auction. So then we began discussions with our partners at Monroe County, exploring the concept of the town potentially acquiring the property to complete some environmental investigations and really prime the property for private redevelopment. So we are here tonight to present our approach to this potential grant opportunity. So I'm just going to basically go over some of the priority transportation and streetscape improvements that came out of that planning effort. So intersection of Old Ridge Road and Gravel was identified as the highest priority area based on community feedback. The graphic in the upper left-hand corner is what we call a heat map, and it essentially, the darker the areas, that means that's where the majority of comments, ideas, and concerns were noted from that social pinpoint site. So as you can see, the intersection of the four corners of the hamlet appeared to garner the most amount of feedback and need for improvement. Sidewalks and associated pedestrian amenities, safety improvements are strongly desired in this area. The second image on the left is what we call a word cloud. The words that you see, based on the size, that's how prevalent the common themes from the comments from the public were. Gravel, ridge, sidewalks, pedestrian, traffic. Those were all noted as the utmost important from the perspective of the community. And then the plan also recommends gateways, branding, the banners, and other public realm enhancements to really celebrate the area's history and create a stronger sense of place. So what you're looking at is the preferred Ridge Road cross-section that came out of the revitalization plan. As you can see, we have 66 feet roughly of right-of-way. We maintain a singular lane for each direction of traffic, but the plan really recommended the addition of sidewalks, the addition of a tree lawn between the street and the sidewalk that contains street trees, street lighting, pedestrian scale street lighting was also something that was highly desired. And you have just a concept of what some of that branding and signage could potentially look like. On the lower left-hand side is a graphic really showing the preferred improvements for the entire study area, including along Empire Boulevard and Gravel. The study does call for some realignments of intersections at Gravel and Empire, as well as Old Ridge and Empire. We are not pursuing those aspects at this point, and we'll get into that a little further into the presentation. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Matt, who's going to tell us a little bit about the TAP grant and what it's all about.
Great. Thank you, Josh. So Transportation Alternatives Program, TAP, is it's federal transportation funds that are then passed through to New York State and then passed through down to the town for the construction of pedestrian and bicycle improvements within public rights of way. So it's all non-vehicular improvements, and right now the state has about $103 million allocated for this particular grant program. A max grant request is $5 million, which can be no more than 80% of a project cost. So local match would have to be a minimum of 20% of the project cost. And it does cover everything from the planning aspects, which we've already conducted a lot of those planning aspects, all the way through to design engineering, potential right-of-way acquisitions as needed, construction, and then construction inspection. So it's a very flexible source of funds that basically can get you largely from project's inception to construction and completion. And it's a program that the town has used in the past. The town was successfully awarded about $1.45 million in these funds for those sidewalks from 5 Mile Line east to Rachel on Ridge Road. So that was a TAP-funded program. And the village, another local municipality, the village was awarded about $811,000 in those same funds for improvements to North Avenue, which is Route 250. And it was a similar type of project where it was sidewalks, street lights, and street trees. That project is actually a lot more similar in scale to what we're contemplating here in the Hamlet of West Webster, and that's why I bring it up today. Next slide, please. So there's largely it takes about 3 to 4 years from the time of the grant application to the time they're actually under construction. And we have sketched out a simple schedule with a program launch in September of this year to a grant application, which will be due in January. The town's grant writing team, Gene O'Connell and Associates, they are actively working on that. In addition, we've also been working with the town's engineer consultant, MRB Associates, on devising an appropriate scope of work, and of course coming up with a cost estimate for the project. So if we are successful, approximately in June is when the award would be announced, contracts with New York State DOT, and of course getting under contract with an engineering consultant. You have to hire an engineering consultant, enter into a contract with them, hopefully by the end of 2024. And then moving through the design process, which would be approximately an 18-month to 24-month process typically. And then going through your final approvals and construction in 2027. So, next slide. It talks to this slide. The previous slide was talking about how long it takes for this to kind of come from where we are today through completion. So why now? Why would we want to go after this grant application now? Why not wait? Well, this particular funding source is only available every 3 years. So the way federal transportation dollars are allocated, it's a 3-year cycle. So in 2014, there was a funding cycle and the village was successful in getting their funding that year. In 2017, there was a funding cycle and the town was very successful in getting funding that year for sidewalks on Ridge Road. Community held off in 2020, now it's 2023, and we're back to the well with a great project that we want to put in front of the state for contemplation. And we've been working to build momentum in this area, in the Hamlet of West Webster, for several years now. And we feel now is the time that would be most appropriate to seek funding to make some substantial physical capital improvements that would show that the public is truly committed to the revitalization of the Hamlet. That key aspect has been something that the private sector has often discussed with me as I have had private discussions with investors or developers about the properties surrounding that particular intersection. We have attempted to get state funding for revitalization of those buildings surrounding that intersection on multiple occasions. We've been unsuccessful in obtaining funding to support the private sector buildings, but I think we're going to be more successful, hopefully, in obtaining funding for the public sector infrastructure improvements along the roadway. And we feel that that will be a great step in the right direction of righting the ship there at West Webster. And I'm going to hand it over to Josh, and he's going to talk about the process that we've been undertaking, I would say, the past 4 to 5 weeks now with MRB to right-size this project for presentation to the board.
Yeah, so this slide that you're looking at now indicates our proposed Phase 1 streetscape improvement project. It runs along Old Ridge Road between Bay Road and Empire Boulevard. The area indicated in red is gravel road. We would ultimately like to extend similar improvements to gravel road, but that is not being contemplated as a part of this particular phase. The hamlet really is split into 2 areas, distinct character areas, if you will. Really primarily the section along Old Ridge between Empire and Cane Patch is what the plan refers to as the hamlet core. And then from Cane Patch west to Bay Road, it transitions more into a residential character and feel. So that's important because as we went through this process, we realized that we might have to scale back some things while still trying to have a meaningful, impactful project. So what I'm going to be showing you on this next slide, again, this is the preferred alternative that was identified in the revitalization plan. It called for sidewalks on both sides of the street, installation of granite curbing for the entire length of the corridor, in addition to adding tree lawns, street trees, and new street lighting approximately every 50 feet on both sides of the street. So we evaluated this from a potential cost estimate standpoint, and the number was pretty substantial. So, the team quickly realized that would not be palatable at this time, so we really wanted to go back to the drawing board and sharpen our pencils. So, we were faced with the question, how are we going to still have a profound impact on the area while still being cost effective? So we went through a series of 3 to 4 design iterations, and what you're about to see are what we are proposing to be included in phase 1. Okay, so this is a Google Street View image of the intersection of Old Bridge and Gravel, looking west. This particular section at the intersection we feel is important to really dress up. So it does include decorative concrete, tree lawn area for vertical separation between the vehicular traffic and pedestrians. We have included granite curbs for in close proximity to the intersection. Eventually it would transition into how it exists today with gutters and no curbing. So this treatment is really proposed for the segment that is Old Bridge between Empire and Cane Patch, and then it would really transition to a sidewalk on the northern side of Bridge Road from Cane Patch to Bay, which is what this next slide is showing. So you may wonder why we had selected the north side. Actually, the right-of-way, the road is not centered within the right-of-way. It's actually skewed a little to the south. So there's actually more room on the north side, and there's also less potential conflicts with existing light poles and things of that nature. So we feel that the treatment near the intersection will be a little bit more enhanced. It'll be more in character with what most people envision a Hamlet to be, and then it would transition to one side of the street when it gets into the more residential area.
Just a point worth noting. It is a very simplistic graphic, so it was not intended to be a realistic representation. So when you see that green tree lawn going in front of someone's driveway, that is not the intent. The intent is that all the driveways would be maintained with driveway aprons, but the sidewalk would be inside of a green area between the gutter and the sidewalk. Just make sure that there's clarity that graphic isn't misconstrued, that we would be proposing to remove driveway access. That's not the case.
So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Matt, who's going to talk a little bit about the cost estimate work that our team is doing.
Great, I get the fun stuff. So, as we had mentioned, there's been many iterations of this project. Even in the planning document that was conducted by Ingalls, there was a very, very simple rubric that was put together about how much was anticipated that this first phase of improvements would cost. And it was actually relatively accurate, but we've broken it down into several project components. We've looked at this from a general cross-section perspective based on the types of materials that would be used, and of course, the quantities of those materials over the length of these, the length of the corridor. And right now, the construction total is coming in right around $3.1 to $3.2 million of construction activities. Because that project isn't going to construction for at least a minimum of 2 years, we're required by New York State, as part of the application, to consider what's called an escalation factor. So we all know prices tend to increase over time, right? It's just inflation. So the escalator that we put in for the project was 8%. And then on top, since it is a very preliminary estimate, there's another 12% for contingency. These are things that, unfortunately, although we've given quite a bit of thought to a lot that's going to take place during this project, we still clearly don't have enough information, nor do we believe we've likely identified all potential scenarios or variables that could come into play. So another 12%. So we're adding 20% right off the bat to bring total construction to just under $3.8 million. And then there are state mandated and federal guideline mandated requirements for all these soft costs that come into play. And those percentages that we're required to use, it's part of the application process. They actually hand us a spreadsheet with all the percentages already plugged in. We can't deviate from it. In the end, that number comes up to 1.3 million, but that takes you through all of the engineering, the environmental review, the bidding, the construction inspection, all of those soft costs, which on average is typically roughly in that 30 to 33% range. So that brings us to a total project cost for improvements from Empire Boulevard on Old Ridge all the way to Bay Road, providing continuous pedestrian connectivity throughout that corridor, in addition to focal point improvements at the intersection of Gravel and Old Ridge of about $5 million. That's what we're projecting today. The cost would be in about 2 to 3 years from now. So as a result, that is the project cost. So the town would be eligible to ask for 80% of that funding, or 80% times this, $4 million. The remaining $1,016,000 plus or minus would be required to be matched with funding other than federal transportation dollars. And where we come up with those funds is a slide that I think Josh is going to talk about. But that's kind of where we are as far as this project and the opportunity before us. So that's the estimated cost. Oh, and this is me again, perfect. So in addition to understanding the cost of the project, we're trying to identify what these potential benefits could be. And other communities have conducted numerous actual statistical analyses, so we're able to kind of glom onto what other municipalities have been able to achieve. New York City has done a study of economic benefits of its sustainable streets or streetscape improvement projects that have focused on prioritizing pedestrians and bicyclists over vehicles. They did this study back in 2014, looking back to any projects that were conducted in 2006, 2007, and 2008. Right? So they looked back many years later, and then understood what was the change in assessed value, taxes that were generated from a sales tax perspective in these neighborhoods. Clearly, we don't anticipate sales taxes to be a substantial change within our neighborhood here, but assessed values and property values we do anticipate would change and would increase over a period of time. And a lot of the studies that have been conducted to date, both in New York City and in Minnesota, indicate 10, 15, 20%, potentially even up to 32% increases over a 3-year period post-construction are not out of the realm of possibility. And although no one likes to think as a resident about, wow, your assessed values go up, which means my taxes go up, well, that's considered revenue to the town, but that's also potential equity in property to go on for those homeowners, right? So they hopefully will be able to benefit from that equity in their property, maybe hopefully reinvest in their properties and continue the cycle of improving the neighborhood. We're hoping to be able to kickstart that process with this project.
So in terms of potential funding sources for that 20% local match, we've identified several potential sources. It could be proactively budgeted for as part of the town's annual budget process between 2025 and 2027. The use of the American Rescue Plan Act, also known as ARPA funds, could be another potential funding source for that 20% match. As I mentioned earlier, the income survey that was conducted did identify this area as being low to moderate income, which opens us up for additional what's referred to as CDBG funds. Obviously, there are a plethora of other grant awards, and we would just obviously seek ones that apply to this sort of project. There is even the potential for private contributions, potentially utilizing some of the town's general townwide fund balance, or potentially a capital project bond. So the next steps for our revitalization effort, it's a multi-pronged approach. So in terms of the planning study implementation, I intend to come back to this board and fully present the plan for formal adoption, which will then pave the way for us to pursue the recommended zoning changes for the area. And we're going to continue our increased efforts in this area in terms of property maintenance and code enforcement. In regards to 600 Ridge Road, the former furniture strippers facility, we are going to continue to work with the county on ownership transfer to the town of Webster. Once that takes place, we will make some efforts to empty out the contents of the building, make sure it's secure and weather tight, and then we would look to complete the necessary environmental investigations to better position that property for private redevelopment. And then in terms of this, the pursuit of this grant, as we mentioned, the deadline to submit is January 9th, so we don't have all that much time, but we have completed a good deal of work that would need to go into that application. So one of the requirements of the application is a commitment from the board stating that if we were to be awarded this grant, that the town board is committed to that 20% local match. It's not appropriating funds at this point, but the state, I believe, and the feds just like to confirm that the decision-making body is actually on board with pursuing this. So with that, I will open it up to any comments, questions, or dialogue. As you can see on the screen, on the left-hand side is what it presently looks like today, and the right-hand side is the vision that's been spelled out in the revitalization plan. And we strongly believe that this grant opportunity would really go a long way in helping us achieve that vision.
Sounds a great plan, for sure.
So first I want to thank you and thank Matt for really spearheading this effort, and for all of everyone who has really taken part in the study and creating a vision for what this could be. I think it's tremendous. My question is, the TAP grant application is due by January 9th, so I assume that you're looking for us to adopt that revitalization plan on our meeting on the 4th?
No.
No.
I don't believe it requires adoption of the plan. It just requires a resolution stating that the board would be willing to commit the 20% if awarded.
So we'll do that on the 4th.
Patty, actually, well,
At any time between now and the 4th.
sure.
Right.
We have on the,
Is it on here?
we have
A
on the,
potential resolution?
yeah, and
Okay.
it's either gonna happen tonight or on the 4th. It's interesting because obviously with the 9th being the deadline.
Right.
talk through that. There was merit to looking at doing this tonight. Of course, I thought Bill was going to be here. Catching up a new board member on the 4th. Can be done.
It's asking a lot.
Can be done. So I'm glad, at the end of the day, this comes down to the fact that if we want to apply for this grant, it comes around every 3 years. One of the checking of the boxes that is in the grant application is the town board at the time committed that they were in for the 20% match if the program was awarded. Now, in June of next year, if we apply for this grant, we do a resolution to commit to the funds. This would be, I guess, a good problem to have. If we get awarded the $4 million, that is, the presentation showed, there's a multitude of options for how we can come up with the $1 million match. In this area would be kind of maybe a lot of things going on in parallel. Other grants that we could apply for. So I just wanted to make sure, since I was involved in these iterations that they described, I mean, this thing started out way more than $5 million when we saw it. There's no way we can go for something that's going to cost $15 million and say, wow, we're going for a $5 million grant, and the town's going to do a commitment to another $10 million. That's a non-starter. So that's where all the iterations kind of came down to. It's not as simple as just coming down to a dollar amount that's palatable within the framework of this grant, but where the project still, as Matt and Josh described, still has some meaningful, how do you describe it, Matt and Josh?
I mean,
It would resonate.
It needs to resonate. It needs to be a competitive and compelling application.
So
Well,
it's interesting. I mean, I think the grant was opened, the opportunity opened September 29th. So they really give you October, November, and December to get your stuff together, and then the deadline is January 9th. I was hoping we wouldn't be coming this late, but the iterations really made us have to sharpen that pencil and do a lot of things. We were supposed to present this last Thursday. Anybody that pays attention to these board meetings, I said to Matt and Josh, did not think they should follow up with this presentation last Thursday based on what we were presenting last Thursday on the topic. That wouldn't have been fair. I don't think the board maybe would have been clear-headed to really absorb and listen to everything about this TAP grant. So,
Well, I think that we've certainly shown that we're committed to this. We've been talking about it for quite a while. And my goodness, we already bought a building for $1, so I guess we need to move forward, right?
but we haven't
What
yet.
money we saved there?
We have not yet. Yeah.
But to that point, we haven't yet. But if you look at how long that building has been in purgatory and how long the community has been concerned about that, I think it's wonderful that we're finally starting to see some movement and some positive progress.
Yes, and I want to make sure that John and Jenny, any comments, questions they have. Like I said, because I've been involved in this, I knew what Matt and Josh were going to present, but some things that I just wanted to make sure maybe are in between the lines of this presentation. They referenced the income survey we did last year that showed that this area is lower income than the town of Webster as a whole. That survey will expire in a couple of years. That's a real feather in our cap to get money over there. So we said, well, let's wait until 27. That we would have to get a new survey done and whatever. It's minor. I think it's minor. The other thing is that at some point, and I don't want this to hold up a commitment resolution on this, but I think we all looked when we were putting these iterations together, that the soft costs seemed kind of high. Which is $1.3 million on a $5 million project. It's 26% of the project. But as Matt and or Josh described, it's state and federally mandated how you do certain things, and there you have it. Be interesting to know the actual soft cost, dollars and as a percentage of the total project, all on the Ridge Road sidewalks. Because just because they ask us to quote them this way when we go for the grant, I think we've done a very good job at this town to manage projects to keep them under budget. But I wouldn't be surprised if the actual soft costs that were spent on that Ridge Road sidewalk project were less than 26%.
I can put that together.
You know, so that's really all I had. Jim, you're done?
I don't have any questions. I think the board is committed to this project and have been for quite some time. The only thing that I would suggest that, you know, is at some point when we look at that building at 600, because it has been sitting vacant for so long. When I did my walkthrough with some of the personnel, I questioned the structural aspect of that building. And the longer the building sits vacant and goes through the 3 seasons, right, it deteriorates more and more and more. So that's the only thing I'm really concerned about before we go in there. We should, you know, have a structural engineer do an inspection. But as far as the project overall, you guys have done a great job, and I think we're in a very good position to get additional grant monies. And I'm fully committed to it myself.
I think it's a great project, you know, community been looking forward to this. So I commend it, you know, all the people that are involved in it. I'm just hoping that, you know, we would have the funds set aside and that we will get the grant, you know, to fulfill the dreams, you know, of our community for this project.
Well, it's 8:37. This is the last board meeting of 2023. So, this is, I think, the last action of 23. I'm going to let it rip and let's see what happens here. I'm going to make a motion for the town of Webster to commit to the 20% match on the TAP grant being applied for by January 9th, 2024 on the Webster Hamlet project, if said grant is awarded.
Second.
Supervisor Flaherty?
Aye?
Councilman Cahill?
All right.